Your turn, Beta. That's not the card you're looking for.
Your Jedi mind tricks won't work here, Obi-Wan.
Oh?
No, they won't. There are more powerful forces here in Haiti. The power of voodoo. Jinn. Ha 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 ha.
Ralph.
Hello. Thank you for watching our video.
Ralph.
Today, we are going to be discussing two
Ralph.
films which are... Yes, Robo?
Still got your mask on.
Oh,
I apologize. I got into character too much. Maybe it was this mask. Dark side? Let me start over, Robo.
Okay.
Thank you for telling me that. Hey, Robo, who are you today?
I'm Red 6.
Oh, yeah, I can see the resemblance. Hello, thanks for watching our video. My name's Ralph. I'm here with my co-host, Robo Ralph.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're going to be discussing two films that have some similarities to each other that you may find amusing. The first film is the 1977 film Star Wars, A New Hope. And you're probably familiar with that as it's one of the biggest films ever made. And the second film we're going to be comparing some similarities of is the 1967 film called The Comedians. And you probably are not familiar with that one because that was a box office bomb and it's rarely shown in the US. So we're going to talk about what The Comedians is about. You already know what Star Wars is about. And we're going to talk about the actors that were in The Comedians and discuss those commonalities. And we're going to talk about The Comedians in that it's a historic Hollywood film. It has a lot of up-and-coming black Hollywood actors in it that would be much more prominent in the 70s up until today. And throw in a couple of trivia for you, and then we're going to talk about how you can watch The Comedians now, and we're going to wrap it up with talking about how both films have a specific commonality that I hope you'll find amusing. So let's get it going. Before we get into all the cast and crew, I would like to talk about how I experienced both films as a kid in the 1970s. We'll start off with The Comedians. They would play The Comedians on daytime TV. So what is The Comedians about? It is a soap opera of sorts, a love triangle between Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, who at the time were actually married in real life to each other. But in this movie, they're having an affair. Elizabeth Taylor is married to Peter Ustinov, who is a diplomat. It's set in Haiti, which is the main interest I have in the film, seeing how Haiti is portrayed in a Hollywood film. No, it's actually not Hollywood in a major film production. It's actually kind of an English production, although it was filmed in France. I would call it an English production because most of the cast is English. There in the backdrop is the turmoil of the Papa Doc regime and his paramilitary police who have unmitigated power of life and death over the population of Haiti. And we'll go into them later on in the video because they have the name that they're called is coincidentally the same name used in the Star Wars universe for an animal. I saw The Comedians on daytime TV as a kid. Runs 2.5 hours long. I'm sure they edited a bunch of it out to probably get it under 2 hours, but I remember it distinctly because it has this very graphic voodoo worship scene in it with a headless chicken and a voodoo priest. So I remember watching that when I was about 12, and that stuck in my head. And later on, I would see the comedians on Turner Classic Movies, the European version, which they were showing in the Middle East where I was at. I said to myself, some similarities there between the actors of that and Star Wars, which I'll get into. So you have the love triangle of Burton, Taylor, and Ustinov, and then you have the outsider Alec Guinness comes into Haiti as an arms dealer, and what he doesn't know is the person he's negotiating an arms deal with has been himself in prison before he got there. So Alec Guinness is on thin ice when he arrives in Haiti. And it goes on from there, and there's an underground trying to overthrow Duvalier. Haiti has had dozens of coups in its history, so the other actors involved in the film are concerned with that aspect of trying to overthrow the Duvalier regime. And those other actors, the most prominent one, that, especially the one that pertains to this video, is James Earl Jones, who was the voice of Darth Vader in the first 3 Star Wars films. So you have Alec Guinness, who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, and James Earl Jones, who was the voice of Darth Vader. And they also starred in The Comedians. Star Wars was originally released in 1977, and at that time I was living in New York City, neighborhood called Greenwich Village, Manhattan. So the year was 1977. I was in Greenwich Village, New York. I was all of 13 years old. I grew up as a big Star Trek fan. They would show it after school every day, and I would watch it pretty much religiously every day after school, multiple times, same episodes. Probably quote most of the lines to some of the episodes. And when Star Wars came out, it was the talk of the town, so to speak. And I really wanted to go see it. The movie theaters where I grew up in Greenwich Village were all old and run down. It had like one speaker behind the screen. I don't even know if they showed Star Wars in those movie theaters, because I think Lucas was a stickler on can only show it in a high-end movie theater with a high-end surround sound. So at that time, in that summer of 77, I was hanging out with this guy. I'm going to call him Bobby because he reminded me a lot of the William Dafoe character in Wild at Heart, Bobby. And he was older than me, and we went to see that movie together. We walked up to past 42nd Street to Midtown, and I looked it up on Google Maps. I don't think that movie theater is named the same as it was back then, but I think it's Ziegfeld Theater.
You walked all the way up from Greenwich Village?
Yep, I walked up 40 blocks with this guy from Wild at Heart, Bobby.
Scary.
And that's the way I remember it, Rubble.
Glad you didn't get in trouble.
Yeah, I'm glad too. Bobby wasn't as crazy as the guy in Wild at Heart. He hadn't been robbing any feed stores yet, so it was all cool. Anyway, I remember being in the theater, and it was totally sold out. I sat about 2/3 of the way back and was along the right side theater wall at the end of the row. I was able to see the screen good, and it was a nice modern theater, one of the best I'd been to outside of Radio City Music Hall. When the film started, it was awesome because it was wired for excellent surround sound. And this was the first time in my life I had watched a film with something in addition to just a screen being behind speakers behind the movie screen. It especially enhanced the film experience for me. I'd be a big Star Wars fan. I had Star Wars comics I would read in my later teens. Some of the artwork on these is pretty awesome. There's one with Boba Fett.
He's cool.
Love the cover of that. And there's our man Darth Vader.
All right.
And besides the comics, I would also get things like the Star Wars toys for my kids. I would get it on home video. I have laserdiscs from back then.
What's a laserdisc? What's a laserdisc?
Laserdisc is like a big DVD. Not as good as a DVD, but it was the best thing before DVDs came out for the mass population.
Nice.
I mean, if you were really rich, you'd get a film projector and watch it on a 35mm print. But for the masses like me, this was high-end video. And I'm gonna do probably a video on Laserdisc too, because I just got a player. And there's some stuff on Laserdisc you can't even get anymore that's involved with Lucas, of all people. So here's the trilogy. Here's Star Wars, the first one. Laserdiscs are cool. They're like albums, records, in that they put nice artwork in there. Make it real nice thing to collect. Now this one, if you see, it says widescreen edition. And back then, if your TV, the TVs were square, so back then if you would watch a movie theater, a film made for the movie theaters, and it was full screen on the TV, it meant it was cutting the sides off. So this widescreen edition means it showed the whole film, and you'd have black bars at the top and bottom. So it would take away the top and bottom of your screen, but you would see the sides, whereas you wouldn't if it was full screen size. Now, the Return of the Jedi is in widescreen for some reason. I don't know if they released it in widescreen. I'm sure they did. But the one that I got, this isn't full widescreen. And if you try to put this on a modern TV, a 16:9 TV, one of these widescreen ones, the picture gets cropped on the sides and the top and bottom. So you have to blow it up, and then you're losing all the resolution. Not very good. Recently, I just got it on Blu-ray. This is really good. Phenomenal picture. Love it. And I'll show you what kind of deal I got on it, which might surprise you. So yeah, I had the Star Wars on the movies, and I had kids later on in life, and I would take them to the Star Wars movies. The last one I saw in the movie theaters was in 2002, Attack of the Clones, and I took my kids to see that. And just like when I saw the first one in 1977, this Star Wars film theater was totally packed 25 years later in my life. So we know that the Star Wars franchise is clearly a phenomenon that's going to outlive all of our lives and go on for many, many, many decades, centuries even. And like I said, I watched The Comedians before I watched Star Wars. It was in the mid-70s when I first saw it. And back then, I had like a 27-inch, maybe a 25-inch color TV and NTSC, just like 500 lines of resolution. And you can see the scan lines if you look closely to it. And then it was on broadcast TV, edited down, because there's some violent scenes in it and a ton of commercials, I'm sure. But I do remember that they had a scene, a voodoo ceremony, so I remember that. The cast of The Comedians, we have Sir Alec Guinness. I was watching an interview with him from the 1970s, and he discussed being at a dinner party in Havana, Cuba, at Ernest Hemingway's home, and he was filming a movie called Our Man from Havana, which was based on another novel that the Comedians author Graham Greene also wrote. He was at a dinner party with them. Greene told the party how he visited Haiti in 1963 at the beginning of the Papa Doc Duvalier regime. He's quoted in the book as saying that he was haunted by Haiti for years after my last visit. Pretty hardcore place to be. Okay, Robo, time for that trivia question. In which country was The Comedians filmed as a substitute for Haiti? Was it A, the Dominican Republic, B, British Honduras, which is now called Belize, C, Dahomey, which is now called Benin, D, France, or E, both A and B, or F, both C and D? And the answer is...
You already told us France.
F, both C and D. Parts of the Comedians was filmed in Dahomey, and then it was also filmed in 3 parts of France, mainly the French Riviera. And in the extra, the Comedians, the DVD extra, The Comedians in Africa, they talk about how the location shooting in Africa was really tough on them. It was like 140 degrees with the lights, and you could imagine Lillian, people like Lillian Gish there. They show her. She looks really worn out, and the whole cast was pretty worn out shooting there. And they even mentions it in the extra featurette that they were really happy to go to the French Riviera to finish it all up. There's a article in Newsweek or Time, a gossip article when they were making this film, that Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were there at a bar in Dahomey, and Taylor says to Burton, let's go home, let's go back to our room, sweetheart, you know, really nice and all, because it was getting late. And Burton says, and I'm done with my drink. So he finished his drink and then said, bartender, I don't know if he called him bartender, give me another bottle of your rot gut. So yeah, this article was from Time magazine in 1970. 1967. The Time article from 1967 is called On Location, The Green Shills of Africa, February 3rd, 1967. And another curious thing that the comedians in Star Wars have in common is that they both have location filming in parts of Africa. In Star Wars, Tantui is filmed, parts of the Tantui set are in Tunisia, the desert of Tunisia. In the comedians, instead of Haiti, because Haiti, this movie isn't flattering to the Duvalier regime at all, so they couldn't film this movie in Haiti, but they wanted to get as close as possible to a location atmosphere to Haiti, so they picked a Western African country called Dahomey, which is now called the Republic of Benin. That's a former French colony on the west coast of Africa. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, just like Haiti is. And the descendants of Haiti are said to have originated from this country, Dahomey. And they made there's an extra on the DVD called The Comedians in Africa. And they talk about Dahomey, and they filmed the voodoo ceremony in Dahomey. There's an article, and if you ever want to know about Papa Doc as far as an outsider, an English perspective, a documentary was done in 1968 called Papa Doc Duvalier Up Close and Personal, or its real name, I think you can find it either way on the internet, is Papa Doc the Black Sheep. Papa Doc the Black Sheep is a 1969 documentary expose, and it was done by a very famous interviewer called Alan Wicker, who's very famous in England. I wasn't familiar with him except by watching Monty Python. They made a skit where all of the cast were, John Cleese, Eric Idle, and all the rest were all acting like Alan Wicker. I didn't get the joke fully. It was still a funny skit, but that was the only way I was familiar with him until I watched this documentary. And he goes into Haiti, and which very few people were allowed to do, and interviews Papa Doc Duvalier, so you should check that out. It's the name of his show was Wicker's World. You can find that on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description if you want more on that. Now, the stars of the comedians, you have Richard Burton, who is a hotel owner in Haiti, and he's trying to get rid of it, but no one will buy it because it's in Haiti and Papa Doc is in charge now. So he goes back there because he's madly in love with Elizabeth Taylor, who is there. She's a diplomat's wife, and Peter Ustinov plays the diplomat. So he goes back to Haiti. He couldn't stay away from her, infatuated with her, in love with her, whatever you want to say. Peter Ustinov and his relationship in the film with Elizabeth Taylor is pretty much platonic, not much going on in the bedroom. So that's where that love triangle is going. And then you have Sir Alec coming in to Haiti to do an arms deal with the regime, but he doesn't know it. But when he arrives, the chief of police there had been locked up, so he was no longer a friend of the regime. So Alec Guinness is in a tough spot. Then you have Paul Ford and Lillian Gish are co-stars. They play a couple of well-to-do Americans who Paul Ford's character ran for the 1948 nomination against Truman for the Democrat nomination, and he lost badly. He ran on a far-left platform of vegetarianism to cure the world's not just hunger problems, but hate problems. He said that along the lines of, if people would be vegetarians, there would be less violence in the world. So their characters are kind of a somewhat comic relief. I wouldn't say all comic relief, but they go to Haiti because they've sent money to the government to build a model town, and they want to see the fruits of their investment. So that's why they're in Haiti. Being that Paul Ford was, even though a fringe presidential candidate, he's treated with a lot of respect when he arrives. And the nice thing about this film is it has a lot of prominent, which were to be prominent, soon to be prominent in the 70s and 80s, even to today, black actors in it, such as James Earl Jones and several others. Cicely Tyson. I'll go through all the cast, but many of these black actors would be very familiar faces in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even till today. Like I said, James Earl Jones is still around and very working in lots of TV and Hollywood productions.
Did this film help black actors?
Well, the movement of black actors being treated on the same level as their white actor counterparts still had a way to go. Some will argue that even in 2020, it's still not on the same plane. But the Comedians film was certainly a step forward for black actors getting equity in Hollywood. It did have a great deal of progress being made to get black actors the same kind of equity of their white counterparts. Just case in point, James Earl Jones, a few years after The Comedians was made, would be the main star in a major Hollywood production, and he would be nominated for a Best Actor Academy Award for his portrayal of professional boxer Jack Johnson from the early 1900s in the film The Great White Hope. It's a very powerful film, and I highly recommend it. And it's not a pleasant film to watch, but not all films have happy endings, and especially the ones based on real life.
Did James Earl Jones win the Oscar?
No, Robo, James Earl Jones didn't win the Oscar, but George C. Scott won for Patton, and it's a shame because Scott didn't even accept the award. He called the Oscars a 4-hour-long meat parade, and I would have thought that it would have been nice if he had accepted the award, but I think the reason why he got picked was Patton was an awesome movie too, so you can't fault that. And I think a lot of the Academy Award voters in 1970 had a lot of ties to World War II, either serving or making wartime films or training films, that sort of thing. So I don't see why George C. Scott wouldn't get the award, but it would have been nice if James Earl Jones had won the Best Actor award in 1970. It probably would have strengthened racial ties in the country. Now, James Earl Jones' big screen debut was in the 1964 Stanley Kubrick film Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. You remember that one, Robo?
Yeah, that was a great flick.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Sterling Hayden, I love that guy. And the whole cast is awesome too. Peter Sellers played multiple roles, and George C. Scott is in that one too.
Small world. No fighting in the war room.
Yeah, I like that part too, where the Russian ambassador is taking pictures with the secret camera of the war room. When I was overseas serving in the military, I was at a Air Force base in Qatar, and they had a big war room set up, and it reminded me of Dr. Strangelove's war room. And speaking of apocalyptic films with Dr. Strangelove, he was also in one, James Earl Jones was, in a post-apocalyptic film. Some well-known actors and actresses like Kim Cattrall and Rae Dawn Chong called City Limits. Despite it being a well-known cast, it is one of the lowest-rated films on IMDb.com. It's in the 2s out of a 1 to 10. It was riffed on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and if you ever want to check that out, that's definitely the best way to watch it. And he was also in another World War III film called By Dawn's Early Light. It was an HBO film, good budget, and spoiler alert, he saves what's left of the planet.
Yay.
Little trivia tidbit. I watched an interview with James Earl Jones on the Dick Cavett show, and he said that he was a stutterer and he wouldn't make a good speech presenter. Well, Robo, now is a good time for a trivia question.
All right.
See if you can remember in the film Dr. Strangelove, the equipment model number that James Earl Jones' character says was broken on the B-52 plane they are in that prevents the bomber from being recalled. Was it the Mark 12 IFF,
I know.
the THX 1138, the CRM 114, or the Alpha 60?
I know.
If you said the CRM 114, you are correct. Now that model number was also in other Kubrick films. It was
right.
The escape pod in 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was the serum that they used in A Clockwork Orange. The hotel room was 114 and Wing C in the film Eyes Wide Shut. And then as a homage, it was also in the film Back to the Future when Marty plugs into the guitar amp CRM 114. As far as the other model numbers I put out there, the Mark 12 IFF was what I worked on in the Navy. It was a piece of equipment that worked with the radars that would send a blip back that would say whether the plane or ship was a friend or a foe. And they have that today on all the airplanes out there. They have IFF, and they have like a distress button you can push that'll send out a code saying that the plane's been hijacked or in trouble or something. It was mentioned briefly in Top Gun in the beginning, although when I watched the remastered version clip, they cut that part out for some reason, so I was pretty bummed out about that because that was the only thing I had in common with Top Gun. And THX 1138, that's Lucasfilm's trademark and name of George Lucas's first commercial film, THX 1138, starring Robert Duvall, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, at least the original. I don't like what he did to it later because it was just like, I don't like watching stuff when it's been altered too much, and he kind of altered that movie a lot. I bought it on laserdisc because that's the only way you can watch the original now other than pirate versions on the internet, so I have it on laserdisc. I have it on Blu-ray too. I'll probably do a video about that. And like I said, the CRM 114 was in Doctor Strangelove. The last choice was the Alpha 60. That was the name of the computer in the French movie made by Godard called Alphaville. Jean-Luc Godard film is Alphaville, The Strange Adventure of Lemmy Caution. I love that film. So I mentioned Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor, Peter Ustinov, and Sir Alec Guinness. Other white cast was Paul Ford and Lillian Gish. But getting to the black actors who played the Haitians in the film, we have George Stanford Brown. He was in the TV show The Rookies, which I used to watch as a kid. Probably best known as being in the miniseries Roots, which was huge in the 70s. And he was in many other productions as a supporting actor, like he was in the Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder film Stir Crazy. Even had a bit part in the Steve McQueen film Bullet. Then we have Roscoe Lee Brown, no relation. He has a list of credits too long to give adequate credit to. He's a very polished theatrical actor with a very distinctive voice, like James Earl Jones has a very distinctive voice that you could recognize even if they weren't on camera. If you could hear their voice, you say, oh, that's James Earl Jones. Well, I recognize Roscoe Lee Brown's voice in the film Logan's Run, where he played the robot Box, the one who would harvest the humans that were trying to escape. And they have a lot in common, at least as far as their careers go. Very distinctive voices. Both were in major science fiction films. James Earl Jones voicing Darth Vader, Roscoe Lee Brown doing the voice of Box in Logan's Run.
Peter Ustinov was in Logan's Run too.
That's right. Logan's Run also had Peter Ustinov in it. Good call, Robo. It also had what were known as Sandmen in it. They were killer cops, so to speak. So it's a coincidence because the comedians have Sandmen in them, although they don't call them that. They call them something different that we'll get into later on in the video. But I remember watching Logan's Run in the movie theater also. It was 1976, I think. I was 12. Yeah, the woman who took me to see Logan, I think she was going off to college, and I was having a bad time in my family structure with my mother was in bad shape, nervous breakdowns, everything was falling apart family-wise for me, and I was living with my half-brother. It was just an awful kind of situation for everybody involved. Now, the woman who took me to see both of those movies is the daughter of Charlie Lawton, who is a close friend of Al Pacino. And Al Pacino and my mom were in his very first play at the Cafe Chino. It's called Hello Out There. And it's on the internet. The funny thing is, it was in 1963, which is the year I was born, and it's about a pregnant woman, and she says she was raped to avoid, because I think she's married in the play, and Al Pacino is the father, and Al Pacino gets locked up. That's the drift of it that I figured out from reading it online. Very dramatic play. It was in Cafe Chino. I didn't know much about. I thought it was just a regular coffee house, but from finding more about it recently, that's been posted online, which wasn't before when I first found out about this play. It is the birthplace of off Broadway. So that's pretty cool. My mom was in the very first play for Al Pacino. And they stayed friends through into the 70s. My mom died young in the late 70s. And Al Pacino was at my first communion. But she's listed on the internet in this play under her prior husband's name. And I know she was divorced in 1963, but I'm wondering if she didn't get married to my father until after I was born, or what happened, because she's listed as Haggerty, Janine Haggerty. Her maiden name is Smith, so you would think it would be Janine Smith. You could say I was a prop of some kind in that play, Al Pacino's first play. That's pretty cool. If Al Pacino ever gets wind of this, I hope he rings me up. I would love to do a movie about my mom. It's a very dramatic ending, and it could be about my life growing up in Greenwich Village, which is in the 70s was pretty crazy times. That was a whole start of the gay rights movement, so could have that as the backdrop, and all sorts of other stories involved me and street gangs and my mother and her bad guys she was hanging out with, and it would be a pretty dramatic movie. I think it would be an Oscar winner if especially if Al Pacino got involved with it. So hopefully he gets wind of this and looks me up. Anyway, hi Al. I wanted to say that Al Pacino, when I was a kid, and other friends that my mother had that ended up being famous Hollywood actors, Martin Sheen, they really were an inspiration for me growing up, because otherwise I didn't have many role models to look forward to, and Al Pacino was definitely a role model. He came to my first communion, showed that he was interested in being friends with my mom and all. I was rooting for him on the Oscars when The Godfather 2 came out. I remember that. I remember staying up to watch that, and I was like cheering. I was watching it by myself. I had a very lonely childhood, growing up in the streets of New York by myself. A lot of crazy stories. At that time when he was in The Godfather 2, we were on Bond Street, which is on the corner of Bond and the Bowery, around the corner from CBGB's nightclub. And it was all warehouse. Now I think it's more gentrified. And I looked up my place that I lived in on Zillow, and it's a couple of $1 million value. When we were renting it, it was, cheap. It was full of mice. Just wild stories out of Bond Street. So I hope Al Pacino does get wind of this video and looks me up someday, because I would love to be a collaborator in a movie about my mom. So Al Pacino's close friend is Charles, and his daughter was the one who was frequently babysitting me, and it was nice of her to take me out where she left to go to college when I was about 12 years old. Great day, I still remember it. Took me to 2 films that day to pass the time away. The first one was Logan's Run. I enjoyed it a lot. And then we went to another movie theater that was blocks away and watched another movie, and that one was The Exorcist was wild. It was in the first run, because I think The Exorcist came out around 72 or 73. So when I saw it, it was like in a budget movie theater. And it was on its re-release. It was a very packed theater, still very popular, and there were people in the movie theater making loud comments out loud. And that was the first time I ever went to a movie where people were shouting out loud at making comments to the movie. They were comical comments, so it helped me a lot because that was a scary movie. So any kind of comic relief, even from the audience, was valued on my part, because I was watching it sometimes like this, looking through my eyes. But that's the way watching movies in New York could be sometimes. I don't know, probably in other parts of, I guess mainly inner cities where movie theaters are at. Because I would go later on. I was hanging out with a guy named Marcus, and we would go hang out at 42nd Street sometimes, and he was always making loud jokes in the movie theater. I remember watching King Kong, the remake, the 1970s version, and there's a part where I think it's Jessica Lange, whoever did the Fay Wray character of the original. She was on a dock, and Marcus said, "Taxi!" And then they dumped her body in a canoe, and he yelled out, "Must have been a gypsy cab!" And I got a good laugh out of the audience. So he's making jokes like that, cracks like that. So whenever I watch the film Cooley High, I think in my childhood days where I was hanging out with Marcus, going to movies on 42nd Street.
Exorcist 2 had Richard Burton.
Yeah, that is something, Robo. Yeah, The Exorcist 2 had Richard Burton in it. Good call. So I remember watching The Exorcist 2 in the movie theaters, and It was a packed house too. Everybody had a lot of anticipation since The Exorcist was such a good movie. I think it came out around 1977, so I saw it in the theaters, and there was Richard Burton. But unlike the first movie, The Exorcist 2 was El Stinko. If you look at IMDb, The Exorcist is rated one of the highest marks, an 8.0 out of 10, and The Exorcist 2 is rated 3.6. So, not a good movie. So back to the other stars and the comedians. Next in the IMDb listed credits, we have Gloria Foster. When I looked her name up, I was really surprised that she played the Oracle in the blockbuster sci-fi film The Matrix. There's another sci-fi tie-in to the comedians.
Awesome film.
I know, right? Part of the reason why I'm enjoying doing these YouTube videos is I learned a lot of the connections that I didn't know about before. And after Gloria, other notable actors are Cicely Tyson, who's in dozens of Hollywood TV shows and movies, including many now cult, apocalyptic, and horror films like Waterworld, Dust Devil, Serpent and the Rainbow, and Body Parts. We've got Raymond St. Jacques, who I remember from the film Cotton Comes to Harlem. He was Godfrey Cambridge's police partner, and he had a memorable role in yet another famous sci-fi flick. He was an outspoken blind preacher fighting an alien invasion in the 1988 John Carpenter film They Live.
Blowing my memory circuits.
Well, don't blow your memory circuits, Robo. We're just here for fun. But we're not over yet. Now, to wrap it up on the cast of comedians, we have yet Honorary Academy Award winner Cicely Tyson. She's briefly in this film.
She was in Sounder, so was Paul Winfield. He was in Star Trek, too.
Yeah. In this movie, The Comedians. Start with the director, Peter Glanville. He was nominated for 1 Oscar, and he also directed 4 of Alec Guinness's films, Beckett, The Prisoner, and Hotel Paradiso, and of course The Comedians. Now, Hotel Paradiso, if you haven't seen that one, that's a funny movie where you have Alec Guinness and Gina Lollobrigida in a sex romp comedy, if you can picture that. I found it very funny. That was another one of those films that they show on Turner Classic Movies overseas, but I have not seen it on American cable. But you can get it pay-per-view through Amazon, I'm sure. The Comedians was written by Graham Greene. He's a famous novelist and playwright. He was nominated for an Academy Award for the film The Fallen Idol, which starred Ralph Richardson.
All right.
Now, The Comedians wasn't nominated for any Academy Awards, but its cast and crew, like I said, were. So of the actors in The Comedians, Richard Burton had 7 Oscar nominations, but no wins. He died young, so he would have definitely gotten an honorary lifetime award if he had lived longer, for sure. You have Elizabeth Taylor, Dame Elizabeth Taylor. She has 2 Oscar wins and 3 nominations. And as far as she goes, she made one last public performance in 2007 before she passed, and she was with James Earl Jones, of all people.
Wow.
And she performed Love Letters, the play, for an AIDS benefit at the Paramount Studios with James Earl Jones. Pretty cool, huh? Sir Alec Guinness had 1 Oscar win and 1 honorary Oscar and 4 nominations. And he was nominated for a Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Star Wars. He won for, outside of Star Wars, his most famous role in Bridge on the River Kwai. Awesome war film. And we have Sir Peter Ustinov. He has 2 Oscar wins and 2 nominations. Lillian Gish won an honorary Oscar, and she was also nominated for 1. James Earl Jones, I mentioned, he was nominated for The Great White Hope in leading Oscar for a leading role. He also won a honorary Oscar for a lifetime. And we have Cicely Tyson, I mentioned. She won an honorary Oscar, and she was also nominated for her role in Sounder. Sounder made me cry. Had its ups and downs. Nice ending, very dramatic, about, race relations in America back then, during the Depression.
Yeah, it was sad. Are there any Ralphs in the flicks?
Are there any Ralphs in the film, Robo? Well, there are 0 Ralphs in The Comedians. But there are 4 Ralphs listed on IMDb for the crew that made Star Wars A New Hope. And one of the Ralphs had a big influence on the Star Wars universe. His name is Ralph Mcquarrie, and he was a production illustrator, He's listed in the credits as a production illustrator and planet and satellite artist, miniature and optical effects unit. Quote from the Wikipedia page about Star Wars. Mcquarrie's pre-production paintings of certain scenes from Lucas's early screenplay drafts helped 20th Century Fox visualize the film, which positively influenced their decision to fund the project. After Mcquarrie's drawings for Lucas's colleagues, Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, who are collaborating for a film, caught his interest, Lucas met with Mcquarrie to discuss his plans for the untitled space fantasy film he wanted to make. 2 years later, after completing American Graffiti, which I also saw in the movie theaters, I was probably 10 then, Lucas approached Mcquarrie and asked him if he would be interested in doing something for Star Wars. Ralph Mcquarrie produced a series of artworks from simple sketches. These set a visual tone for the film and for the rest of the original trilogy. And other Ralphs that were in it, Ralph M. Leo was a location auditor, and we have 2 Ralphs that are uncredited but listed on the IMDb page. Ralph Eisen, who was a musician, he played the trumpet, and Ralph Helfer, he was an animal supervisor for Gentle Jungle Company. I believe the name of the company was Gentle Jungle. And while I was editing this video, I stumbled upon a movie I'd recorded on my DVR called The Lion from 1962. And while I was watching the credits for that, I saw the same Ralph Helfer that was in an uncredited role in Star Wars as an animal supervisor. And this movie, The Lion, he is credited as an animal trainer of the titled Lion. I think he was called King in the film. And that film starred William Holden, and it was shot on location in Africa, in Kenya, which is coincidentally a place I visited twice while I was in the Navy. So I just wanted to mention that, since part of these videos is talking about my life, and I mentioned that in my first videos. My ancestors down the road know a little bit about my life. As far as Ralph Helfer is concerned, he's really famous. I looked up his bio that I hadn't before, but after I watched parts of The Lion, I realized this guy was pretty big. So he was the trainer for the bear in the TV series Gentle Ben, which I watched that as a kid all the time. Another Star Wars comedian's connection, since he was he had an uncredited role in Star Wars and as an animal supervisor. He trained the MGM lion that we see at the beginning of the credits for the comedians. Leo the Lion, he wasn't called, his real name isn't Leo. Just glancing at Ralph Helfer's bio on IMDb, he knew a lot of people because he was so big an animal trainer. He knew Elvis Presley, William Holden, Deborah Pageant, John Agar, John Russell, Sabu, Marlon Brando, Paul Newman, Betty White. He did a TV show with Betty White called The Pet Set. Alan Ludden, William Shatner, there's a Star Trek tie-in, Bo Derek, John Derek, Sonny Bono, Cher, and his childhood friend was Carol Burnett. He created a new type of animal training called affection training, which wasn't using whips and violence and coercion that way. It was kindness to train the animals. He provided many animals for the Walt Disney movies, and he owned several safari jungle parks out in California. I think he lives in Kenya now, but I'm not sure. According to his IMDb trivia page, he lives in Kenya, East Africa, where he leads safari tours with the company founded called Eden International Safaris and Treks. He developed and filmed 3 television series, Doctari, based on the John Wayne film, Gentle Ben, trained the bear for that, and Cowboy in Africa, which I never heard of. I'll have to look that one up sometime. Besides the other stars I mentioned, he was also very close to Mae West, Shirley Jones, Elvis Presley, Chuck Connors, John Wayne, Burt Lancaster, Tony Randall, Larry Hagman, Barbara Eden. Just a lot of people. What a famous Ralph. Well, I wouldn't say he's a famous Ralph, because I never heard of him before, but he had a lot of famous friends. The MGM lion that he trained is known as Leo the Lion, but in real life the lion's name is Zamba. And a funny thing that he doesn't have in common with me, or maybe he does, but it doesn't bother me, he was once allergic to cats. I don't know if he's still allergic, right? And friends with William Shatner, probably because he worked on the set of Star Trek, the episode Shore Leave, that was filmed on his jungle amusement park. William Shatner had hoped to wrestle Ralph's tiger in Star Trek Shore Leave. Oh yeah, I remember the tiger. But Ralph convinced him it would not be a wise decision. Here's a funny trivia about Ralph. Shirley Temple was bitten on the finger by a baby alligator that belonged to Ralph. Now,
Ouch.
my tie-in to Ralph Helfer is that he filmed the Lion, the William Holden film The Lion, at William Holden's Safari Ranch in Kenya. And I had visited Kenya twice in my life while I was in the Navy. My ship would do what's called a Westpac, Western Pacific. And we were based out of San Diego, and we would sail, we would hit Hawaii and fuel up and resupply ourselves, and then hit places like Subic Bay in the Philippines, went to Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and then we would eventually go to the Indian Ocean, go to places like Diego Garcia. Our ultimate mission was to go near the Persian Gulf to maintain U.S. Navy presence and the flow of commerce, because Iran was threatening the oil tankers there. So we were one of the ships that was sent over there with the aircraft carrier, and part of the carrier battle group. Our carrier battle group was the USS Carl Vinson, and we would be out there for weeks at a time, not seeing any land. So Kenya, Mombasa, Kenya was really the only place we went to out there for rest and recreation. So I went to Kenya twice. First time was in 1985, the second time was in 1986. And I remember they had a special promotion where we could go to a 5-star hotel in the middle of the Masai Mara Reservation, animal reservation, which is a protected place where they don't have any game hunting there. The animals roam free. I flew out there with about 4 or 5 other sailors off the ship on this small plane. We landed on a dirt runway by the side of some mountain out there. We were totally isolated. It was all the doors in the hotel were locked up. We weren't allowed to leave other than going on a tour van. So we went out there. I booked it. The trip was for 4 days, I believe. And we went out there and took a lot of pictures. And I have this selfie I was trying to take there was a lion that wasn't moving too good. It was like laying by itself underneath a tree, and we pulled up to it to take pictures. And we were drinking this beer called Tusker beer. That in the heat, not having a drink for a couple of months at least, really went to my head. So I crawled out of the van window to try to take a selfie with the lion. It was like a Instamatic, 110 film cheap camera. They didn't have smartphones back then where you could see yourself taking a selfie. Stupid thing of me to do. One of the if I ever make a video of times I almost got killed, that'll definitely make the list. The tour guide is a black guy, Kenyan. He's freaking out. Get back in the van. Get back in the van. So I got a picture of me, but I didn't get the angle right, so I didn't get the lion. And thank God the lion looked really hungry. It's a good thing it didn't attack me. It was probably sick though. It was like covered in flies. But stupid me. That's what happens when you're 21 and drunk in the middle of the bush. Another funny thing about being out there was we had 4 days prepaid 5-star hotel, beautiful place. We are the only ones in the hotel, the 4 or 5 of us off the ship, and they have no entertainment at night. It is boring as hell, especially when we didn't even get a night on the town in Mombasa before we went out to this place. We just flew right straight there from the ship, and it was a good thing they had beer there, Tusker beer, which if you ever had that, I'm not a beer drinker anymore. I wasn't that crazy about it, but it was the only beer you had out there in Kenya. So we're out there. After the second day, we're just all sitting around, and I saw that the pilot who had flown us in was still there in the hotel with the plane, and I managed to talk all the other sailors there. Hey, let's get out of here. We don't want a refund. We just want to leave. So we flew out of there 2 days early, and we went back to Mombasa, which is the port city in Kenya. And from there, I found this place that must have been colonial time casino nightclub called the Florida Club, which is ironic because that's the state I live in now. And that place was awesome. It had multi-levels. It was on the water. It had its big outdoor deck built out of stone. Had a casino with roulette with only 1 0 on it. Usually the roulette tables have a 0 and a double 0. So this roulette table had better odds. I was playing next to my 60-some-year-old captain on the ship, Captain Bailey. Hey, Captain Bailey, if you're still around. Just packed place. 500 or more people. They had a floor show at midnight where they did some tribal dance. just blowing my mind. It's full of local women there. I had an amazing time there. When they talk about Vegas, everything stays in Vegas. Vegas got nothing compared to going overseas, places like Kenya. And unfortunately, the Florida Club is, I looked it up for this video, it's closed due to the COVID. It looks like COVID hit Kenyan tourism really hard because there's a lot of bars that were there that are closed in the last couple of years. But hopefully Kenya makes a rebound. That's a great place to visit.
How can I watch these films now?
Well, Robo, how I watch the film now, I Plus, so you could stream that or buy it on disc, not necessarily laserdisc, because those are outdated. But I got mine on Blu-ray disc, and I get this. It says Star Wars: The Complete Saga, which it isn't complete anymore because they made several reboots of the Star Wars. This has the first 6 films. And I bought this on Blu-ray. And the nice thing about this is I got it cheap. $10.50, if you can believe that. I bought it used on Amazon, and the seller was Goodwill. You can get some good discs cheap through used sellers. And since this was from Goodwill, it was probably somebody's estate, and the heirs just dropped everything off at Goodwill. So it's a really nice set. I think it goes for like over $50 on Amazon if you want a new set. And I think also the prices on these Blu-rays are going to start coming down. Not just that I bought one that's used. This thing is in really perfect condition. It's got the booklet in it. Came with a booklet called Guide to the Galaxy. So it's really cool, man. And these discs are in really good shape. No scratches. Besides the 6 movies, it's got 40 hours of extras. So I hardly touched the surface on this. I was playing the second audio with the commentary, and they talking about how George Lucas wanted to make a soap space opera similar to Flash Gordon, which I read that he wanted to get the rights to Flash Gordon and make a Flash Gordon before he wanted to make Star Wars, and he couldn't get the rights to it. So lucky for us, he didn't get it, because they did remake Flash Gordon in the 70s, and I doubt anybody remembers that compared to what George Lucas made with Star Wars, which was, you know, his own project. Fate helped us out on that one. Some of the extras, it's got the first appearance of Boba Fett in a cartoon. And if you ever watched Heavy Metal, the part with the New York cab driver, the artwork for this Star Wars cartoon is very similar. I think it was made by the same people. And so that's just skimming the surface, the commentary. It's got all sorts of stills of the artwork that Lucas, you know, submitted to Fox and stuff like that for $10. And I got 6 movies on Blu-ray. There's deals like that out there, so check that out. Especially with 4K now getting more and more mainstream, video files are going to start dumping off their Blu-ray discs, and you can find some good deals on them. So you can watch it streaming on Disney, and like I said, I got mine. $10 for all 6 flicks plus all 40 hours of extras in an awesome set. Now the comedians I watched originally overseas on Turner Classic Movies Europe. In America, they don't show it on cable at all. You can order it on Amazon Prime Video. It's $3 to rent and about $6 to purchase. It's SD quality. I got mine on DVD. Again, I bought a used one. I think the new ones are like $15. I got mine for around $7 with shipping. I bought it through Amazon. I like to go through Amazon in case there's a problem. I can usually get a refund. I say usually because there was a time I didn't get a refund on something. There was a big lawnmower that they dropped it in price $100 the day after I bought it, and I couldn't get a refund on that. The first Comedians DVD I bought, see, I got 2 of them. This was the first one, and it doesn't have a scratch on it, but for whatever reason it didn't play. So I was able to get a refund very conveniently through Amazon, and then I repurchased it because I knew I was going to do this video. About $7. I think you can get a used one for under 10 or a new one for 15 through Amazon. And this is a regular DVD. not Blu-ray. I don't think it's out on Blu-ray. But maybe after this video and it becomes a big sensation on YouTube, maybe they will re-release it on Blu-ray. Okay, Robo, it's time for another one of my predictions of the future. In the future, with all the media companies being gobbled up, kind of like Karl Marx predicted in the Communist Manifesto, where there's only going to be like one corporation. All the media companies are going to be owned by the same person, same company. If that ever happens, there's a good chance there's going to be a parallel universe movie crossover between Star Wars and Star Trek. And it'll be so far in the future that they'll have CGI actors, so they'll be able to recreate William Shatner as Captain Kirk and Harrison Ford as Han Solo, and back from the 1970s days. And so you could have all the original actors and they're all in a movie together. So I'm predicting that in the future. The Enterprise is going to go through the Great Barrier, go through a wormhole and end up in the Star Wars universe right when the X-Wing fighters are attacking the Death Star. And I think that would be pretty cool, don't you? And because these two franchises, which have a rivalry between their fans, you know, you're either Star Trek or Star Wars fan, or at least that used to be like that. I don't know if it is anymore, but when they were both in the same movie, the fans of both franchises are going to come to a lasting peace, and there's going to be total world peace as a result. That's my prediction of the future. Thank you.
That's impossible.
What's that, Robo? You don't think it'll ever happen? Well, you know, nothing's impossible, especially when you're talking science fiction. So it's going to happen someday. You just wait. When Disney owns Paramount, it's going to happen. So as far as its legacy, The Comedians holds an IMDb rating of 6.3 out of 10, which is not excellent. Not the worst though. It has 2,200 votes in it, and 44 people made reviews on it, so it has some interest, especially with all those big powered stars. People are going to comment on it. Now, by comparison, other Graham Greene film adaptations have scored higher. The 1948 drama The Fallen Idol, which, again, starring Ralph Richardson, is rated at 7.7. And then the Orson Welles Joseph Cotten mystery thriller The Third Man is rated extremely high, 8.1. And the Alec Guinness spy comedy drama Our Man in Havana is rated at 7.2. Part of the reason why The Comedians has a lower rating than Graham Greene's other adaptations is some people on IMDb were confused at the title because it's called The Comedians. They thought it was a comedy. And I can see where they're coming from. You know, The Comedians might be a good ironic title for a book about life in Haiti, but as a movie, people would walk into that thinking it would be funny, and no comedy in that movie whatsoever. Despite it not having a high rating, as is Graham Greene's other adaptations, it still merits a view, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. You'll see the guy who did Obi-Wan Kenobi and the guy who voiced Darth Vader in the movie together, which I don't think they were in any other films together. I mean, if you're a geek, Star Wars geek like me, trivia geek, that's definitely noteworthy. Plus, it's a cool movie in parts, especially when I'm talking about Haiti and they got voodoo in it, and it's a very it's a very chilling atmosphere. I don't want to pitch this as a selling point, but there is a notorious scene in it where Alec Guinness is in blackface. So not the most PC wokeness for 2022-ish, but if you look at it from a perspective that it had so many prominent black actors in it at the start of their Hollywood film careers and seeing where they went afterwards. It's a good historical piece to watch. Plus, like I said, it has the Star Wars tie-ins. Well, Robo, I saved the best for last. The other tie-in that the comedians and Star Wars, at least as far as the franchise goes, is they both have tauntauns in them.
Tauntauns, I love them.
That's right, tauntauns in Haiti.
They're so cute.
Well, they're not quite the same tauntauns. Whereas the tauntauns in Star Wars are lovable, make funny noises, cute noises, and help the rebels out on planet Hoth because they can't get their regular scooters to work in the extreme cold. These tauntauns in Haiti are the secret police. Well, they're not
Say
secret.
what?
They're the in-your-face police. They're the president's police, and they have ultimate power of life and death.
Sounds
And
scary.
they're above the law. So
Not nice tauntauns.
you don't want to be friendly with these tauntauns. And
No.
like I mentioned in Logan's Run, they have Sandmen in them. In the comedian's film, and in Haiti, the tauntauns are short for Tauntaun Makut, which stands for a form of bagman. And a bagman is someone that makes you disappear. And the tauntauns made a lot of people disappear in Haiti. So I put together a mashup. So we're going to finish out watching that. So let's check it out. Now, I want to warn you, there is some graphic violence at the end of this. As the tauntauns kill somebody that is tied into the Star Wars universe, actor-wise.
Oh, look, dear.
no.
Major Jones has found his friends.
Oh, good. Sea like a pond, very pleasant companions. What the hell is this? Who are these thugs?
I am Captain Concasseur, and these thugs are the President's Special Police. Tonton Makut.
Welcome to Haiti.
Brown, please come quick. He's done terrible thing. He came yesterday to hide from Tortos. I tell him to stay here. A very sick man.
What happened tonight?
I hear car. I think Tortos come. I say, go away double quick. He say, I am sick. Too late to go anywhere.
Why did he come here? I was no great friend. Too many refugees at the embassies. The Tonton keep a close watch. Perhaps he thought an Englishman's home really is his country.
Did you report it?
Who to, ma'am?
And is there no law or order here?
Tonton make law. Tonton make order.
Tontons, I can hardly complain. They are there, they tell me. For my Tonton.
Tonton with
Tonton. Tontons. Tonton. Tontons and Tontons.
Tauntauns.
Tonton?
Tonton. Tonton.
Tontons.
Well, it is time to say goodbye.
So there you have it, fans of Star Wars. Check out the film The Comedians if you want to see those actors who played Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in another film, and a whole bunch of other tie-ins to other sci-fi films, and even some tauntauns. And if you like
Not nice
this,
ones.
please subscribe and like. I'd appreciate it. Next video coming up is going to have another role that Sir Alec Guinness played. This time he was a very notorious historical figure. There have been multiple movies made about him, and I'm going to be comparing all of them. So make sure you Hit that like button and subscribe so you'll be one of the first to know when I publish that video. Thanks for watching. And from me and Robo, take care.
The power of voodoo.